Hey folks, Eric Stakelbeck here. Welcome to the Watchman Newscast. We've got a live stream here today because we have breaking news, folks. A major development in the Middle East, the world's most chaotic and strategic region, unfolded today, Monday, April 1st, Easter Monday, the day after Easter. And this is not an April Fool's joke. One of Iran's top commanders was eliminated today in the Syrian capital of Damascus. Now, the Israel Defense Forces are not claiming responsibility, but it looks pretty obvious that Israel was behind this strike that eliminated this top Iranian commander. Let me break down some of the facts for you. Number one, Israel, again, not claiming responsibility yet, but the Iranian regime is gnashing its teeth and wailing over this, vowing revenge. More on that in a minute, but some of the facts here from the Times of Israel. Iran's Islamic Revolutionary Guards Corps, in a statement carried by Iranian media, officially announced today, Monday, April 1st, the deaths of 7 members of the IRGC, that elite vanguard of the Iranian regime. 7 killed in this alleged Israeli strike in Damascus earlier today. Among the 7, and here's the big fish, are Mohammad Reza Zahedi, the most senior IRGC Quds Force commander in Syria, and his deputy, Mohammad Haj Rahimi. Zahedi, again, he was the biggest target here, was the Quds Force official in charge of the unit's operations in Lebanon and Syria. Wow. I mean, Lebanon and Syria, arguably Iran, the most crucial theater for Iranian operations right now, and in particular, Iran's Islamic Revolutionary Guards Corps. Syria, Lebanon, that will be the front for this great northern war that's coming. We've been talking about it here in the newscast, and we'll break it down more today. But if he was in charge of all operations for both Syria and Lebanon, then folks, again, you know he was a very big fish and a high value target. He is now gone. Mohammad Reza Zahevi has now been Zahedi, I'm sorry, has now been eliminated in this airstrike. And again, he was one of 7 taken out in Damascus. Now, a few more details about this strike, what Iran is saying, why now, what Israel is saying, nothing much, but Israel more largely, more broadly, is talking about the Iranian regime. And it's rare since 1979, in 45 years since this wicked regime took power in Tehran, it's rare that it actually faces consequences. Is this an example of Iran starting to face some consequences? Remember, this isn't the first strike. Back in December, we had Syed Musavi, who was commander of Iranian forces in Syria. He was eliminated. So again, when you're touching the Islamic Revolutionary Guards Corps, folks, the IRGC, which is the apple of the supreme leader in Iran's eye, they answered directly to him. When you start touching them and targeting them, it takes things to another level. And this hurts the Iranian regime. It hits them right where they hurt. Just as I would argue in many ways, the Iranian regime has never recovered from the death of Qasem Soleimani, the not so dearly departed terror master, who was taken out in a U.S. strike in January 2020 on orders of President Trump. Soleimani was such a central figure in Iran's regime, arguably the second, third most powerful man in the regime behind the supreme leader, that Iran has never quite been able to replace him. But someone like Zahedi, who was eliminated today, was certainly one of the standard bearers in the wake of Soleimani's death over 4 years ago. He was one of the people carrying that banner for Iran's Islamic Revolutionary Guards Corps, which, remember, the Quds Force in particular, an arm of that corps, is in charge of external operations outside of Iran. We're talking Syria, Lebanon, Yemen, Gaza, Iraq. The list goes on. So a very significant takeout. Here are some more of the details about how it all went down, and you're going to want to hear this. The Iranian consulate, according to one media outlet, I've been scanning the wires. It just came across the wires a few hours ago, folks. I was very busy today filming some other things, but coming across the wires, it described it as a complete collapse, a complete destruction of this building that Zahedi and these other Iranian Revolutionary Guards Corps officials were in. And here's some more details from the Times of Israel. Flattened was another term used. They allegedly carried out the airstrike on a building next to Iran's embassy in Damascus. The strike in the Damascus area municipality of Mezeh hit a building adjacent to the Iranian embassy. And there's footage of this as well. We don't have the footage on the live stream, but tonight, hey, tune into the Stacklebeck Tonight Show, folks. A quick reminder. That's why I was filming earlier. I mentioned we were doing some filming earlier. Tonight, 7:30 p.m. Eastern Time, and then again at 10:30 p.m. Eastern Time. We get into this a bit with our guest, Johnny Moore, a good friend of the Watchmen. You've seen him here before. And we do show you that footage on the Stacklebeck Tonight Show. Again, it's on TBN. We just launched last week my brand new nightly show on TBN, 7:30 p.m. Eastern, 10:30 p.m. Eastern Time, twice per night. Check it out. Check your local listings. It is on TBN, seen everywhere around the United States, around the world. Do not miss it. We also dig into the rise in Christian persecution around the world. Did you know that right now is the worst period for Christian persecution since the time of Jesus? Some 365 million followers of Jesus under the threat of severe persecution. I think after I'm here in the West in the United States, we have viewers around the world, but here in the U.S., we worship pretty openly and freely, although certainly there are signs, troubling signs here in the West as well about believers being targeted, but not physically targeted for death like they are in places like Iran, China, North Korea, etc. So I think it's a good time today, the day after celebrating Easter, to remember our brothers and sisters in Christ who are suffering under this sort of persecution around the world. So we'll do that tonight. And again, we get into this Iran-Israel story as well with our guest, Johnny Moore. And we also talk about, did you hear about this if you live in the United States? The Transgender Day of Visibility, declared by the Biden administration on Easter Sunday. So I have a few things to say about that as well. Don't miss it tonight, Stacklebeck Tonight. Okay. The building today that was struck by the Israeli Air Force was reportedly flattened. It was part of the Iranian embassy compound in Damascus. Now, look, there's a reason that Israel has targeted Damascus again and again and again over the past several years. And the main reason is Damascus has been used as a transit point. The Iranian regime is using Damascus International Airport, and they're setting up shop in and around Syria's capital city in order to funnel weapons into the hands of the likes of Hezbollah and to press up against Israel's Golan Heights along the Israel-Syria border. So again and again, the IDF, in particular the Israeli Air Force, has struck Iranian and Hezbollah assets in and around Damascus. But folks, talk about, excuse me, a daring strike. Number one, pinpoint intelligence yet again. In Syria and Lebanon, Gaza, the intelligence there does not appear to be on the level that it is in Lebanon and Syria, where Israel repeatedly has taken out high-value targets, Iranian, Hezbollah, Hamas as well. Saleh al-Aruri in Beirut, the Hamas leader, taken out earlier this year. So in Syria and Lebanon, Israel, to great effect, has struck and struck hard. We see another example of that today. But Iran has this embassy compound in Damascus, and this was apparently the consulate building, and it was flattened by the Israeli Air Force. And again, Israel's not claiming responsibility, but it's pretty obvious. I'm not giving away anything too revealing or top secret, folks. Let's just say that. Pretty obvious that Israel carried out the strike. And Reuters calls this, of course, Reuters, a startling, apparent escalation of conflict in the Middle East that would pit Israel against Iran and its allies. Well, a few things there. Number one, a startling escalation. Who escalated things on, I don't know, October 7th? That would be when Hamas, backed by Iran, invaded southern Israel and slaughtered 1,200 people, men, women, children, the elderly, and dragged over 230 more into captivity in Gaza. Call me crazy, but that seems to be sort of an escalation. What Israel is doing is responding. What Israel has been doing for nearly 6 months now. April 7th will mark the 6th-month anniversary of the October 7th massacre, the bloodiest day for the Jewish people since the Holocaust. All Israel's been doing since then is responding to being invaded, looted, raped, and pillaged by Hamas, who came out of Gaza. And all Israel, so Hamas launched an invasion and a war on October 7th. Hezbollah launched a mini war, soon to be a larger war, on October 8th, when it, again, without provocation, began firing rockets and missiles into northern Israel. And the point I'm getting to here is, well, why target Iran? Hezbollah does not exist. And Hamas does not carry out October 7th without the Iranian regime. Folks, that is a very valid and true statement. Again, Hezbollah, which currently has more than, I'm sure by this point, there's some estimates over the years, 150,000 rockets and missiles pointed at every inch of Israel. That number's probably closer, I don't know, to 200,000 now, according to some people I talked to on the ground in Israel. That doesn't exist without Iran. The Iranian regime created Hezbollah. It's funded, armed, trained, supported ideologically in every way. So that's one thing to think about. And October 7th does not happen without Iran. And there's been various takes. Well, Iran didn't know that Hamas was going to go on that day. But even if they didn't, and I'm not convinced that they didn't know that Hamas is going to act on October 7th, but even if its Iranian masters did not know, Iran knew that Hamas eventually was going to move against Israel in an October 7th style fashion. How do we know? They've only been training Hamas to carry out these sorts of attacks for years. And in mid-September, just a few weeks before the October 7th massacre, the invasion by Hamas, we had some 500 Hamas and Palestinian Islamic Jihad operatives in Iran training. Wow. I wonder why. But don't worry, Iran knew nothing about October 7th or that it was in the works. Come on. Hey, folks, Hezbollah doesn't exist. October 7th doesn't happen without the active support, participation, arming, everything by the Iranian regime. And that is why you're seeing Israel target Iranian terror officials. You might say, terror? What are you talking about? He was a general. Well, no, Mohammad Reza Zahedi was more than a general. He was a general in Iran's Islamic Revolutionary Guards force, Quds Force. And why is that significant? Well, under President Trump, the United States designated the Islamic Revolutionary Guards Corps as a terrorist organization. So he is a top official for an anti-American terror organization. From an American perspective, that's how I'm looking at it. And certainly he is a top general for a terrorist organization committed to the state of Israel's destruction, who right now was operative word, was in Syria, controlling and directing all of Iran's terror operations in Lebanon and Syria. Hezbollah rockets raining down on Israel point back to Zahedi. Incursions across the border from Lebanon into Israel, rockets out of Syria, all trace back to this one man. He was engineering plans and directing plans that would see and have seen Israelis killed, including one just last week in Kiryat Shimona in northern Israel as a result of a Hezbollah rocket. So Zahedi, needless to say, not only directing operations in Syria and Lebanon, but probably had his claws into other operations across the region. He is no more, but I'm laying this out so that you know why Israel would target this man who was a terrorist with blood on his hands and who sought to have more Israeli blood on his hands. So Israel is protecting its citizens and its nation. And I said the same thing in January 2020 with Qasem Soleimani. People said, how could you do that? Well, Qasem Soleimani, when he landed in Baghdad before being eliminated, he was there for meetings to plot further attacks against U.S. soldiers in Iraq and Syria. Now, I'm an American, and I don't know. I mean, taking it from the U.S. perspective, when they carried out that strike in 2020, I think it was the same mindset as Israel had today. Wow, this is a very evil man, an arch terrorist who has already killed some of our citizens or directed attacks against our citizens and who has plans to kill many more. Maybe we should strike him before more of us are murdered by him and by his planning. Seems pretty logical to me, but, you know, we live in times, as I like to say here, where common sense is not so common. Now, a few more things to break down. Again, apparently this Iranian embassy and consulate where Zahedi was targeted is very close to the Canadian embassy there in Damascus, and the Canadian embassy didn't have a scratch on it. So another pinpoint strike by Israel, needless to say. But a few more things here. I jotted down some notes. Again, this was breaking news earlier. I just jotted some bullet points down that I could share with you on this live stream, and we unpack it a bit on Stackleback tonight as well. Number one, the prophetic. Hey, we've seen comments already. I'm just monitoring the chat. We have a very active chat here. Thousands of people with us right now, thousands more before we are done from around the world. Welcome, everyone. Hey, by the way, if this is your first time here on the Watchmen YouTube channel, hey, be sure to subscribe. Click the notification bell so you get alerts every time a new video is posted. Hard to believe, but we're fast approaching 900,000 subscribers. And that's not for our glory or our edification. We're just trying to do what God has given us a platform to do for such a time as this. We like to say this channel is by God and for God. And I don't say that lightly. So we're trying to honor him and just share the truth in times where the truth is at a premium. But Damascus and Isaiah 17. Now, every time we talk about Damascus and Israeli strikes in and around Damascus, everyone says, man, how close is Isaiah 17? Well, listen, number one, Isaiah 17 says that a day is coming when Damascus, one of the world's oldest inhabited cities, will become a ruinous heap. It will cease to be a city. Now, that's not the book of Stacklebeck. No such book exists. That's the word of God saying, yes, that Damascus, again, one of the world's oldest inhabited cities, will be no more. So you take it for what you will. But it seems to me that Damascus has never been completely destroyed. Even the Mongols didn't turn Damascus into a ruinous heap. And yet the Bible says there is a day coming when exactly that will happen. I take no joy in saying that, folks. Damascus is a great ancient city with incredible, obviously, history. It's a biblical city, but something is going to happen to precipitate, a very dark day in Damascus, needless to say. And the more we see the intensification of strikes there, and more importantly, the more Iran and Hezbollah operate out of that city, the more likelihood you have for something major happening there. Again, Iran has not gotten the memo. I guess that's the best way I could put it, folks. The more Israel strikes Iran and Hezbollah in and around Damascus, the more it seems that Iran and Hezbollah are determined to continue setting up shop in that city and using it as a hub, a transit point to transit weapons into the hands of Hezbollah and other terror acolytes at Israel's doorstep. So, look, Isaiah 17 watch, I guess you could say. I interviewed our good friend Pastor Jack Hibbs recently, and I said, hey, what are you looking for? We were talking about the prophetic, and he's got a great new book out called Days, D-A-Z-E, The Days of Deception. Tell me we're not living in those days now. But he said, the first thing he said is, I'm looking Isaiah 17. I'm looking for that. And folks, if we're not creeping closer to that, and of course, Ezekiel 38 and 39, the war of Gog and Magog, funny name, I know, but a name you need to know. Just check out the book of Ezekiel, chapters 38 and 39. It breaks down a war that's coming in Israel's north. By the way, Russia, who I believe will lead that latter days invasion, and Ezekiel calls it a latter days move by this confederation that comes against Israel. Russia today condemned almost instantaneously Israel's strike in Damascus. Now, folks, this is something to unpack in that Russia and Iran, and look, this was a top Iranian Islamic Revolutionary Guards Corps official who was eliminated. Russia and Iran now, it's not just a casual relationship. It's what I believe a prophetic relationship in all the wrong ways. It is a formal military alliance between the Iranian regime and between the regime of Vladimir Putin. I mean, Iran is not only supplying Russia with probably by this point thousands of attack drones that it's using in Ukraine, but there are persistent reports that Iran is also supplying Russia with short range and perhaps even mid-range ballistic missiles. Russia needs to replenish its stockpiles. It's very simple. It's also turned to North Korea, China, and other rogue regimes to see its arsenals replenished. So when we look at the Iran-Russia relationship, folks, it's a quid pro quo, where the Iranian regime is not supplying Russia with these armaments out of the goodness of its black heart. I'm talking about the mullahs in Tehran. No, they want something in return. Now, call me crazy, and we've discussed this a bunch here in the newscast. I would think that the Iranian regime is saying to Russia, okay, we're going to give you these drones. We're going to even send you ballistic missiles. We're going to back you at the UN and other global bodies. We'll continue trade with you, everything you need, Russia. But we want something in return. And what does Iran want in return? Well, number one, sanctions relief, and Russia and China have been helping them with that over the years, no doubt. But don't you think that there's a good chance, I call me crazy, that Iran is saying to Russia as well, hey, wait a minute. In Syria, for the past 13 years, Israel has been striking us hard, us and Hezbollah. Russia, we're your friends. Remember, Russian soldiers have been in Syria since September 2015, fighting shoulder to shoulder with and sharing intelligence with Iran and Hezbollah. And now Israel, under those same Russian soldiers' noses, remember, there's still thousands of Russian soldiers in Syria. They effectively control the skies over Syria if they want to. They could enforce a no-fly zone if they want to. But Iran's saying, we're your friends. We're helping you left and right when it comes to Ukraine. And the Zionist entity, as Iran would call it, is mopping the floor with us and killing our top people in Syria. Vladimir, right under your nose. What are you going to do about it? You can't let Israel get away with this. Well, those Iranian pleas apparently have fallen on deaf ears because Russia, as yet, has not yet stepped in and tried to say to Israel, we're going to enforce a no-fly zone. Israel, no more airstrikes in Syria. It's done. Now, a day may be coming where Russia does that, and perhaps today's strike could precipitate that, where Russia says, you know what, these are our skies over Syria. The Assad regime that's our good friends. The Iranian regime, Hezbollah, that's our good buddies. They're our allies. We need them. Russia's at the point where it actually needs Iran, not only for diplomatic support on the world stage, but for armaments, as I laid out a minute ago. I never thought I'd say that before the Ukraine war, but Russia now needs Iran. Russia's looking for armaments. It's looking for a few good friends, and it's found that in Iran. So Iran has had a black eye, bloody nose left and right from Israel under Russia's nose in Syria. How long can that last? And Russia and Israel, according to Israeli officials I've interviewed, they've had this kind of agreement where Russia has said to Israel, okay, we will step aside. We won't step in while you operate in Syria. Folks, I ask you, and I'd love to get your comments on this. We have a very active chat right now. Do you think that's going to last? It seems to me that eventually Russia is going to step in and say to Israel, well, look, they might try to step in. Will they step in physically, militarily, put jets in the air to intercept Israeli jets? I mean, we're getting ahead of ourselves here. I think in the very least, diplomatically, Russia could call for this openly. Again, they condemned the strike right away. And if you've been watching Russia's foreign ministry over the past 2 years or so, there's been some vicious statements and completely untrue statements levied against Israel by Russia's foreign ministry. So listen, Iran, when it comes to Russia, it's too big to fail. Russia needs Iran right now. It's an embarrassment to Russia, you would think, for Israel continuously to strike at Russia's dear friends and close allies in Iran on Syrian soil when Russian troops are present. So, folks, we're keeping a very close eye on this. Eventually, a day will come where Russia and Iran formalize their relationship, I believe, their alliance, like never before, and they join together along with Turkey and others to come against Israel. They won't get very far. I buried the lead. They will perish on the mountains of Israel, but it's going to be a very, very tumultuous and precarious time for the world's one and only Jewish state until the God of Israel, the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob intervenes and shows himself to the world like he hasn't in 2,000 years in a very public and mighty way. fasten your seatbelts. I think the seeds are being laid for that right now, and we see it with this coming Great Northern War. Look, what you saw on October 7th and what you see in Lebanon and in Syria since October 7th are birth pangs, bloody and horrible birth pangs, but before a larger confrontation to the north. And I was talking to my friend Johnny Moore today. He just got back from Israel, and I was just in Israel last month. And we both, the first thing we said, our big takeaway from our time in Israel was the north. Now, both of us were on the Gaza border, and we were at the site of the Nova Music Festival in Be'eri, where Israelis were slaughtered by Hamas on October 7th. By the way, I mentioned Stakelbeck tonight. We air every night again, TBN, 7:30 p.m. Eastern Time, with a re-air at 10:30 p.m. Eastern Time. Tonight's show's great with Johnny Moore, Christian persecution, Iran, but tomorrow night, we're on the ground on the Gaza border. It's a special edition of Stakelbeck tonight. We're calling it Breaking Evil. That will air tomorrow night from the Gaza border. You won't want to miss that. Mark your calendars. All week, catch what we're doing. We've got some great stuff lined up all week, every night on the show. But tomorrow night, I wanted to mention that. But so both Johnny and I were on that Gaza border, which is heavy, obviously, considering the massive demonic activity that went down there on October 7th. And we try to, I know I did with my team, we try to reconsecrate that area in prayer for the Lord after the evil that was done there. But both Johnny and I agreed, and others I've talked to who have been in Israel recently agreed, the north. There was almost a sense of dread when I was in the north. Look, as a follower of Jesus, I have a spirit, not of fear, but of power and of love and of a sound mind. And the situation up north felt like war. And I know people are saying right now, well, they're just skirmishes, border skirmishes. It's much more than skirmishes, folks. I was able to enter a closed military zone with the Israel Defense Forces in the north. And I can tell you the feeling something big is going to happen there. It's not a matter of if, but when. And it's not me saying that. That's top Israeli officials saying that left and right. There is a nasty showdown coming to the north. I've called it the Great Northern War. And I say that and the Hamas war with Gaza, again, is laying the groundwork for a larger confrontation. And down the road, that confrontation will be Ezekiel's war, the war of Gog and Magog. But what you're seeing right now, it's going to escalate. Each confrontation is going to get more serious. Gaza war, horrific. Great Northern War, even worse. Ezekiel's war, another level, and another level in terms of prophetic impact. But you're living in the days, and you're living in Bible times. You're living in prophetic times, perilous times, no doubt, but God Almighty is still on the throne. Now, I mentioned earlier that Iran has many times not paid consequences for its nefarious actions. Again, Hezbollah wouldn't exist. October 7th wouldn't have happened. That's for starters. Also, speaking as an American, the Iranian regime directed the slaughter of some 500 Americans in Iraq, probably more in the last decade. And a good buddy of mine who I grew up with in Philly was killed by a roadside bomb in 2006 in Iraq. And that roadside bomb may have very well been planted by Iranian militias, Iranian-backed proxies. Probably was, because they became notorious for that. Planting IEDs and roadside bombs did the Iranian regime, training their acolytes in Iraq to do that. So the list goes on. But how will Iran react? Again, they're gnashing their teeth and howling about the death of Zahedi today, and they're vowing revenge. What's the most likely recourse as we wrap up here for the Iranian regime? Folks, if you take the long view and you kind of break down the past 10 years or so, every time Iran suffered a major loss or a heavy blow, the Iranian regime usually reacted by striking out externally, meaning it wasn't usually in Israel proper. Look, Israel hardened targets there, obviously. Israel must be better prepared, much better prepared, but overseas, embassies, consulates, Jewish community centers, Jewish targets, synagogues, many times Iran, it's kind of asymmetrical warfare, I guess you would say. The Iranian regime would react in that way, where they're getting their revenge, which they're vowing, but they're not striking Israel directly say, firing missiles at Tel Aviv, God forbid, and sparking what would undoubtedly be a major regional war. Now, that's usually all bets are off here after today's strike, in which 7 members of Iran's Islamic Revolutionary Guards Corps were killed, including Mohammad Reza Zahedi, one of the top officials in the Quds force, a top Iranian general. Apparently 2 generals, including Zahedi, were killed in this strike today in Damascus, the Iranian consulate there. I mean, folks, it was a very, very big deal. So how does Iran react this time? Does Iran take it on the chin and bad enough, try something overseas against an Israeli or Jewish target overseas? Or does Iran try to respond in a more direct way? And the most direct, immediate way they would do that, I think, folks, could be to activate Hezbollah to a greater degree. Hezbollah is, I mean, it's an arm of the Iranian regime. And it's perched on Israel's border, at least 150,000 rockets and missiles, and engaged right now in a hot war with Israel. Look, folks, the second front has been open since October 8th, when Hezbollah launched rockets against Israel. It's not open all the way, but it's open, and it's opening wider and wider and wider, to the point where eventually there will be a major war in the north, where Israel is forced to, if not eliminate Hezbollah entirely, like Israel is in the process of doing in Gaza with Hamas, then certainly pushing Hezbollah back some 18 to 20 miles beyond the Litani River in Lebanon and away from that Israeli-Lebanon border. You cannot have a situation where some 80,000 Israelis are evacuated from their homes in the north. It's a ghost town. They don't know when. There is no north if no one lives there. And what happens to Israel's economy there and the economy in the north? So those people have to return home who live along the Lebanon border. But they can't do that with the current state of play right now. I can tell you that much. So look, you know how to pray right now. And we are praying that if Iran, the Iranian regime, has any sort of response to the events of today, that God confounds their response, that he frustrates their response at their revenge plans, and that it does not come to fruition, that he frustrates the plans of the wicked again and again. We ask that with everything that and everyone that Israel is facing right now, these truly wicked, evil, demonic forces. It's a demonic death cult. It begins in Tehran, where, by the way, I'm talking the regime, not the people of Iran. The people of Iran are the biggest victims of this regime. I love the people of Iran. It's a Bible land. Persia, from your Bible, Esther, Mordecai, Cyrus, Darius. We just had the holiday of Purim last weekend. And tonight on Stackleback Tonight, again, reminder, we'll talk about the Iranian church. I'll leave you with an encouraging thought. Iran is the world's #1 state sponsor of terrorism, according to the U.S. government and many other governments. But Iran is also seen to the world's fastest growing church. That's right, folks. A great untold story. Underground, the church is thriving in Iran, and followers of Jesus are multiplying in droves because you can't stop the gospel. Now, that's encouragement. Again, Stackleback Tonight and every weeknight, Monday through Friday, 7:30 p.m. Eastern Time and 10:30 p.m. Eastern Time is the re-air. We unpack all of this tonight. Don't miss it. Until tomorrow, thanks for joining us here on The Watchman. God bless you. And remember, never hold your peace.
Hey everyone, thanks for checking out the Watchman Newscast. Make sure you hit the subscribe button so you never miss an upload, and tap the bell icon so you're notified every time a new video is posted. And don't forget to share your thoughts, insights, and comments below. Thanks for watching.